He's been away too long.
So, buenas tardes. ¿Están bien? Sí. Bueno. It's great to be here. It's been a while, and it feels just like old times. And with all of you in particular, it feels just like homecoming week or something other. So, want to thank all of you for coming. I'm not entirely sure why we got asked to do this.
12 out of the people said no.
Because you have Nick, who's an ornithologist who's an expert on birds, and then you had Tug over here, who's done this incredibly amazing adventure in the South Atlantic, and this guy over here, who is the smartest man in the universe that I know. It's just absolutely brilliant.
Better check with his mother first.
So all we did was go on a little trip.
Just remember, you came last.
But so I'm not sure how spiritually edifying or uplifting this will be, but it was kind of interesting that we I don't do a lot of posting on Facebook, and as we went into this trip to Peru, I started posting on Facebook just as a way of. There were a few people who had expressed some interest, and it seemed like that was getting around, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to become a big Facebook head here, right? This will be a new venue for me, so I started posting more. And people were showing some interest, so it seemed like this might be a good thing to do, and a lot of people have thought about Peru and have a little bit of interest in Peru. So thought this might be a good opportunity when Daryl asked me to do this presentation with Danielle this evening. Travel is a big part of what retirement for myself and with Danielle has been all about. I've been an inner traveler all my life, and there are inner journeys and there are outer journeys, and both are exciting. And Danielle and I both engage in both those journeys. But Danielle has a little bit more passion for the outer journeys and the outer travel. She said, "You're retiring, we're traveling." That's the way it's going to be, right? And I'm not quite as adventurous as when it comes to traveling as Danielle is. She has a little more courage, and maybe that's some of what Danielle will add for you this evening. If this time together can encourage you to actually, maybe I can go to some exotic place, that would be a good thing. Traveling has all sorts of incredibly wonderful benefits, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it also has some downsides in the world today. They say that air travel is one of the really bad things we can do for the environment, and yet that's why when Danielle and I travel, we like to travel in a way that mitigates some of the negative side of travel in the world, and that's why we like to use local people. We try to use smaller venues as places where we stay. We like to hire people who are on the ground rather than going through big corporations and companies and that sort of thing. So and tourism is a huge source of income and well-being for people around the world. So there are things that we can do to travel more lightly and to travel more respectfully in the world, and I think that's what we try to do, and that's what's also going to come through in our presentation this evening as well. Let me just ask you, what do you get out of traveling? Just pop up. If you're to say
peace.
Peace. Interesting.
Getting away.
Being away.
Being away.
And what does being away signify?
Just being.
Yeah.
Responsibility here, us there.
Yeah.
Letting go of responsibility, right? So that's part of the peace that you're talking about as well.
Understanding
Learning.
history.
Say a little more about the learning.
About other cultures and the way other people live and other countries live, not other people. We're all people of this planet, so but how things work in other places.
Exactly, Wendy. It gets us into other people's heads and perspectives and views of the world. Yeah, Holly?
Well, I said history because I'm interested in the history of the British Isles, so I love to go there and see things that you read about and learned about in school.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Joy and wonder.
Joy and wonder. Yeah. There was lots of joy and wonder on this trip. Pretty cool. Yeah, the rest of Terry.
I think all of us like to have new experiences, and when you travel, there's just an opening and intensification of the amount of new experiences that you can have. So, and most of them are delightful, some of them are stressful, some of them are educational, but there's just so much when you travel that it takes you out of yourself a little bit and expands who you are.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, and you're saying taking us out of our comfort zone as well, traveling to poorer countries, like many of us would have traveled to Europe. Danielle and I have traveled extensively through Europe and across North America and Hawaii and places like that. But traveling to poorer countries takes you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but it also gives you a perspective on the world that comes kind of from the edges. And you know, that perspective from the edges is really, really healthy. Jesus spoke from the edges, right? He always taught from the edges. He lived with the poor, he worked with the marginalized, and it's people on the edges see the world differently than people who live in our context, right? And they have a different perspective.
I would add it's actually the majority, so it's not actually the edges.
Yeah,
but it's not the edges in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's helpful to see how one of the great motivators for me to travel is exactly what you said, which is I'm interested in the anthropological and sociological side of things and how people live differently. And that's why I tend to do less things in more time, because I like to I don't want to go place to place to place to place. I like to settle in and kind of really start to feel the place and let it permeate. And the ways people live and the ways people think, the way their language works, the way that I like that. That's what I love about traveling, is that you start to think differently, challenges the way you think, challenges the way you see the world, and allows you to sort of see all kinds of different aspects of the human condition. So, yeah.
Go below the surface.
Yeah, below the surface, and also get a bit better sense of the reality for most people.
So Danielle, why don't you talk about why Peru?
Okay, before I do that, I'm just also gonna say, please get up and get a coffee or do whatever you need to do, okay? So don't feel like you have to sort of listen the whole time. So Peru was well, first of all, my father married a South American, so, and Spanish through my connections with Guatemala years ago, long before I came here. I sort of, and I enjoy Spanish anyway, so I had been enjoying languages. I enjoyed learning different languages, and so for me, any Spanish-speaking country is exciting to me. It's a place I want to go and use my language, maintain my language, and I like the culture, whatever. So that was the first thing. But the second thing was that I've been part of a spirituality group, and one of the last almost 5 years. And in the group is somebody who has a connection with a shaman in Peru. So that was kind of on my, okay, here's Peru. And then the next thing that happened is somebody at work, a young fella, 25 or whatever, had just come back from Peru. And he started telling his stories, and I thought, now that's the way I like to travel, the way he was traveling. And I said, well, that's really cool. Like, can you give me some connections for things that you had done or where you've gone or whatever? And so I picked his brain a bit. And so then the other reason was the time, I had to use up some time from work, a real practical problem. So I thought, okay, what can I do in the month of March, where the weather's not too bad, so it sort of fit. So everything sort of came together, and I thought, this would be a really interesting trip. And David's saying to me, why Peru? It wasn't on our radar, because just it's going to work, right? And anyway, we'll talk to you a little bit about the logistics, but it all just fell into place really easily. And just seemed to be meant to be. So, and I had a bit of a sense going into the trip that it was going to be about much more than just seeing a bunch of things. So that was my sense of it anyway.
So one of the things about traveling, and I titled this "Off the Beaten Track" a little bit, is for people who are a little insecure in terms of traveling to a sort of perhaps a not going through a travel agent necessarily, and not going always to the most popular places. How do we even start to do that? And so, do you want to talk a little bit about that, Danielle, the hows and the logistics of what we went through in terms of doing this? Because people say, how did you do that? How do you organize all of this?
Okay, well, the first thing is to go. I think I personally think it's hard. One of the key things is not to expect everything to be perfect. Perfect, right? If you can let go of the idea that everything's going to go smooth, and every day is going to be, you're never going to wait for anything, you're never going to be in a lineup, things aren't ever going to get canceled, you're never going to have a lousy bed to sleep in, and you're not going to sleep for the night or whatever. If you can let go of all that, that's the first step. Because that's one of the big problems. And if you only have a week, and you gotta, you have to get rested because you're exhausted, then this is probably not the right kind of trip, right? So, you have to be honest with yourself about that. You might be quite miserable, if that's what you're expecting. So the first thing is to let go of the idea that everything has to be smooth, and understand that some days and some series of days might be hard, and that's okay. And then you just like life, right? Some days are not so easy, and you just have to let go, right? Same is true in traveling. So if you let things go, that's the first step. Relax with it, and it does help to have more time rather than counting on that 1 week that's going to be bliss. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the internet is our friend when it comes to these kind of trips. We did a lot of checking out things on the internet. So and it is a bit of an intuitive process too, because if I'm planning something particularly, a particular place I want to go visit, if it just isn't coming together, it's not lining up, or the place, or I'm getting a sense that it just doesn't feel right, I'm out of there. I don't hang on to the idea that I got to go there. I just switch my gears. Okay, you know what? It's fine. It's not going to happen. Let's do this instead. Let's look at, and guess what? Something wonderful happens. And that's what happened here. Because one of the things that happened with us is we had a sense, okay, we're going to Peru. First thing we did was get a flight. And you can shop around for those, and it's pretty interesting, the different kinds of ways to get flights. And if you do a little bit of searching, you can really get a good deal. And we really did very well on flights. Very, very reasonable. So that was the first thing. And then once we have a flight, then we're saying we're definitely going. So let's figure out what we're going to do. So the first thing is get the flight. I have a philosophy generally, just in traveling, not that we applied all this on my trip, but as you organize the first day and last day. Because I don't like to be guessing where I'm going to sleep for the first day and the last day. So no matter what, when I'm coming in, I want things organized that first day. That's how I operate. And you might want to do the first couple days, but I find the in-between, I like to be a little more, doesn't turn out, I can change hotels. I don't want to be locked into something I can't change hotel. Oh, you know what, this city, I don't want to stay here 5 days, I want to stay here 3 days. Or you know what, I really love it here, I want to stay another 2 days. So I like to have a little more, I don't want it to all be locked in. So that's the first thing. I don't mind booking something if something looks great, but I'd love to be able to back out and do something different, go with a different plan. So that's one of the things. In terms of booking things, You have to decide what kind of accommodation you want, what level of accommodation you want. We found that, as David alluded to, we love to try to support local people on the ground, smaller places, not the Hiltons and whatever. And for one thing, it's just like camping. I love living in the woods. I don't want to be living in a place 20 miles away and going into the woods, sort of the same idea. So we used hostels a lot, 2, 3-star places, if you're going to do those hotels. We generally had a bathroom to ourselves, so that was pretty good. It's amazing for, a tenth of the price. You have a nice bed, a bathroom, you get a breakfast, and you're comfortable. What I would say in Peru, the one thing we noticed is that, when you stay in local places where there's only 4 or 5 rooms, or maybe 10 rooms, or something like that, the noise, you're not going to have a little cocoon that we're used to. You're going to have something that is exposed to, and I'm an introvert, I like to have my space and all that, but you get used to it. Used to sound in a way, you feel like you're part of something when you hear the street noises and all that sort of stuff. So, so actually that was a positive in the end. As a matter of fact, when David and I came back, the very first comment we made is, "It's so quiet. It's so boring." Like we both felt that way. Like I don't feel connected to anybody. We're not, like there's no sound. So it's interesting that after 3 weeks you can feel like this is uncomfortable. So I sort of understand people that come back and feel that way from other countries. They come here and it's like so quiet and so isolated. So yeah, so so decide if you need to, what kind of accommodation you need to stay at. We certainly had lots of options. We could have gone with higher end hotels, paid a little more, done all that. But that's the choice we made, to stay in sort of slightly lower end hotels. One of the things we loved about that was we got to meet the local people. So it ended up being all about relationships, So we're in the hotel, we know the people we get to know the people that run the place, they're chatting with us about everything under the sun. They're telling us about their kids, we get to meet their kids, then, etc. And we've got emails and addresses and phone numbers, and we're fully expecting somebody's going to show up on our doorstep right from the trip. So you know what I mean? So that's the kind of thing you get when you choose that route.
Okay, so that's it. So a little bit of organization. We did it all ourselves. No planning through any travel agents. We went online. There was the situation in the jungle that we went to, and that you're going to see a fair bit of, was that was the one little bit of a wild card. They wanted to be paid up front in advance, right? And for everything that they were doing. And we thought it through, and we were a little hesitant, but in the end we did do that. But you had to be willing. It's a little bit like, I suppose, like poker or something, right? you put your money down and you might just lose it, right? If in that situation. But we had done as much due diligence as we could in advance, and it all turned out really well. So
I should say something about that whole thing. Like when we went to the jungle, we only had so much time. That's why I said about I wanted to only go so many places, and we thought about we either would go to Lake Titicaca, which is where a lot of people go, or we would have gone into the jungle. We couldn't do both. And so when we did a little Googling on where to stay in the jungle, there were these places that were just like $5,000 for 2 nights or 5 nights or something, just crazy. And we just went like, that's not happening. So then we didn't do that, and we also didn't think just the kind of way they had it set up. So we thought, this doesn't feel like real. So that's when we started Googling alternatives. What can we do that would, put us in the area we want to see, and yet be a little more supportive of the local people, a little more realistic to what life is like there. And also, there's a large Indigenous community there, so we want lots of Indigenous people everywhere. So you want to be respectful of that too. I didn't want to be in some fancy van that was traveling all around, and if anything, your target, not I mean, obviously, I don't look indigenous, you know, I can't get away from that. But and happy to be tourists, but I don't want to be, I don't know, just didn't feel right.
Okay, sweetie, we gotta get to pictures.
Go.
Is this turned on?
You have to, you
But
probably
that
have
was
to
the story
start.
around why we ended up where we
No,
ended
it,
up.
it should be on, but just to open up your iPad again.
Okay.
Just go, you might have to go screen mirroring one more time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so they enjoyed the actual pictures and the track. It really was quite a spectacular.
Okay. So, we caught a flight, and I think it was an Air Canada flight, Danielle? We caught an Air Canada flight from Montreal straight to Lima. And so Halifax to Montreal straight to Lima. But the first thing is getting there is you get there in the middle of the night, right? So that's one of the things about traveling. It's not always convenient, right? And not only do you get there in the middle of the night, the place that we had booked to stay in the middle of the night was.
In a sketchy neighborhood.
So this is what Danielle's talking about. That's what we stayed in. There's good bed, two beds, whatnot. It was hot. So a couple of bunk beds, that bed. There's a decent bathroom. Now you see what it's like this corrugated stuff on the top. This is an upper level. It's an old kind of warehousey sort of thing. And but it had a hammock.
Day one.
So we got there in the middle of the night. We had arranged for them to send a car. They sent the car to us. The person's actually, we had a little bit of a hard time connecting. There's always somebody who speaks English, right? So you never have to worry about the language. There's always somebody at the airports who speaks English and who will be helpful, right? So I ended up chatting with the security guard and he said, oh yeah, he got on my phone and we managed to get the guy who had come to get us. He brought us to this place, but it had bars over the door. The place,
You wouldn't know there was a hotel.
we didn't know there was a hotel there at all, right? But when you got in, you know, it's fine, they're there. This is the view. You can tell it's kind of sketchy industrial area, not too far from the airport, right?
It's better in the morning than at night.
This is our introduction to Lima, okay? And the very first thing that was interesting to watch is you see these like three-wheelers. They're not like our three-wheelers that cost like $10,000, right? These are our homemade three-wheelers, people carrying vegetables in and out of the city on these things, right? So that was an interesting common sight all the way through. We didn't stay long. We stayed like a few hours. We got in the middle of the night. We got a bit of sleep, and then the next morning around noon hour, we boarded a flight, and it's a Peruvian airline, and I looked that up online too, which are the safest Peruvian airlines. and this was the slightly more expensive one, but not a lot more expensive, but I tell you, they were as good as Air Canada. Their website, everything about them was absolutely first class and absolutely spot on stellar. Coming into Cusco, so this is just after we landed in Cusco. It's a beautiful sunny day. You'll see Cusco is in kind of a valley. Cusco is a World Heritage Site
It's
in
at
itself.
11,000 feet.
That's high, very, very high.
Did you say 11, Danielle?
I did.
11,000.
Now, here's
Almost 12, actually, 11,000 something.
here's on a bit of a cloudier day, but you see,
It's all low rise.
that's all low rise, exactly. And the plane is coming that way, and it's coming from the far end of that picture of the valley. So the plane is going to get into Cusco. Now, I've never flown into Hong Kong, but I imagine it's something, the plane was going, and Brian, you would have loved it. Where are you?
He was
Because they had
actually
to fly
flying.
this jet,
He was
right?
flying. You had to fly this thing.
Spectacular setting. You see a spectacular setting, surrounded totally by mountains.
How far from Lima?
It's about a 12, 13 hour drive to Leyva. It was about two. No, I think it was a bit longer, about 2 hours.
Hour and a half, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It wasn't
So
long.
not long by flight. Beautiful city. I'm just going to show you a few shots of the city. This is the main square. You can see the hills and the mountains all the way
And all
around.
the tourist restaurants are all around.
All around, right?
So that's where all us tourists see.
And people are accosting you on the streets all the time. This is,
Same thing.
yeah, the same square. One of the old Spanish cathedrals that has, apparently there's a tunnel that links that Spanish cathedral with an Inca holy site. Now, the interesting thing in Peru is that a lot of the Spanish Jesuit Franciscan churches were actually built on Inca sites. It's a way of co-opting the local spirituality. They also stole the gold and silver because for the Incas, gold was precious, not as a currency. It was precious because it represented light and the sun, right? And so the Spanish came and said, "Phew." And so they managed to abscond with a lot of the gold, and they built their churches on very special holy sites as a way of drawing the people into the culture. And that's time and time again. The Incas were known for building in beautiful places. Beautiful
Also gods,
places.
close to the gods,
Close to the gods, right?
the sun god.
Did you guys get altitude sickness in that?
Okay, so that was my big,
No.
I had a feeling I would, and I did.
Yeah.
So I had a hard time with the altitude. That was the one thing that limited me, because I would have liked to have gone to another site which was quite a bit higher. It was at 16,000. I couldn't do it. I would have had to wait. I probably could have done it at the end of the trip, but at the beginning of the trip, there's no way.
Did you adjust?
Yeah.
How
I mean,
long?
3 weeks. But not for that. In
No.
terms of being sick, I had high blood pressure, headaches, all that sort of stuff. Couldn't sleep because not high blood pressure, high heart rate.
Right.
You know, like just like boom, 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 boom. You know, and just walking anywhere was a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So that is the downside, and that's why a lot of people that come to Cusco, the first thing they do is come in and then go to something a little bit lower. They go to Sacred Valley first.
Or they go to Machu
Yeah,
Picchu,
or they-
because Machu Picchu is actually
It's
lower than
6,500.
Cusco, right?
So it's lower. So yeah.
This is where we stayed. This was our little house in Cusco. It was on a street that quite ordinary, but it was a street that led right into the main downtown kind of area. See modern kinds of vehicles, also with those kind of rickshaw types of vehicles. Right across from where we had our room, there was this kind of little bit of a square between two sides of the road, and these young people would come constantly with their boom boxes and practice dance steps. And so we had constant entertainment. It was absolutely true. We would walk the streets night, afternoon, right, Danielle, and there's constantly, it was just...
It was
Did you
a-
join them in any case?
It was a dance studio close by. So to get out into the coolness, they would go in the square. My theory.
These are just some of the back streets in Cusco as well. All the old cobblestone, the small, narrow little alleyways. But off of some of those, you go through some of those narrow doors, and there are major clubs and shopping areas. Some are ordinary little small shops, and some have been all totally renovated on the other side of the walls.
Did you have to share those little alleyways with any conveyances of any?
Sometimes,
They were
yeah.
also
Sometimes pulled by animal?
Also,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
stairs also. You can't see this, but a lot of these places have stairs. But they're very colonial, right? This is all
Yeah.
colonial era.
Yeah. This is
That's where I got my
Rawls's.
camping equipment.
We had to rent a few sleeping bags at one time, and so here's some of the architecture. Again, that colonial Spanish architecture. Yeah. This was a little restaurant again in terms of eating. This was a little local proprietor, a couple of women who made their own food, made their own soups and things right on site. We just popped in. This was just around the corner from us, and we ate there a couple of times, and they were really sweet. You talk to them?
Yeah, so if you ever do go to Cusco, the thing to do is to eat your big meal at lunch, and it's at least half price, maybe even less. So if you're cost conscious, you buy it in the afternoon rather than at night. So switch your habits, right? Do as the locals do, and you'll save yourself a lot of money.
So
You'll meet
again,
more interesting people, because it won't be travelers, it'll be the local people that eat at lunch.
I didn't take a picture of the bathroom. It wasn't something to write home about, but it was, it was fine if we needed to use it as well. And on the other hand, there
We
was,
also did this.
and we also did this, right? This was a higher end kind of cafe that actually I don't have the shop that we were looking at, but to a lovely square, and that was fine. So when you're traveling this way, you have to treat yourself sometimes too, right? That's part of the joy as well.
And you're
Yeah.
like it 'cause it's
And these are dogs.
Dogs everywhere.
Everywhere.
Dogs everywhere, right? Just really cool. And they just sort of wander around and they find garbage spots to eat, and sometimes people feed them as well. And I just thought they were really, it was quite a sweet thing. Now this is their Walmart in Cusco, and we really didn't. There were some higher end shopping areas and that sort of thing, but this is where a lot of the people went, right?
It's a very, a lot of things made in China or whatever, but you can get very cheap local food there too. And next to nothing, all the locals are there, in the San Pedro market. So, yeah.
So
See
everything's there.
everything there.
And you can eat there too. And so this is a juicing stall.
So just sort of sit there and have your juice or whatever.
They'll juice it up for you, that sort of thing, right? Now here, this is a shot of Cusco, sort of higher up in the hills, and you can see down. So there are nicer areas, and the downtown area is all very nice, but there are these little shanty towns, all tucked into the hills as well, right? The weather isn't like here, and so people can live with much less kind of physical structure around them, right? But they also just don't have the money as well. So, and we'll see more of that in Lima later on, but there's a lot of, so this is what you'll see a lot of as well, right? There are lovely places down in the main part of the city, but then this is what a lot of people live in up in the hills. When we first landed, I looked up at the hills and I thought, are those where all the rich people live? And no, that's where all this stuff is, right? So you can see it. You can see the roads and whatnot. Drivers are amazing in Peru. You have to be able to negotiate over rough roads, narrow roads.
We want to give drivers awards there because they were really good drivers. Really good, like superb, amazing.
Now I thought I would just do a quick little thing here. In one of the museums that we were in, they showed this painting. And this is a painting of the night sky by a Peruvian Inca artist. It's quite famous. And this is just a wee bit of a read. The painting by Cusco artist Miguel Eras shows the Milky Way over Cusco in the months of July and August, when the sky is clear and most of the astronomical phenomena venerated by the Incas can be easily observed. In the Andes, the Milky Way is called Mayu, celestial river. Unlike the Western constellations composed of groups of stars, the Andean culture distinguishes dark spots against the light background of the Milky Way and identifies them with silhouettes of animals that have come to drink its waters and darken its shining with their shadows. Isn't that interesting? These spots are called Yanafuyu black clouds. And then on the right-hand side of the painting, you see the big water serpent. In the center, two small figures of Yutu, a partridge, and Hampatu, a toad, can be seen. They are followed by the female llama with two shining eyes corresponding to the stars Alpha and Beta Centauri. And so it's animals that they see in the night skies as well. And we're just starting to
Can you go
get...
back to the picture? There it is.
We're just starting to get a sense of, as we're in Cusco, of this Inca mythology and a very different way of seeing the universe, right? And their whole sense of spirituality is a little bit different from ours. So that's what this started to introduce to us. So after we're in Cusco for a wee bit, just for a couple of days, we head off to the jungle. Now, there you can see Cusco down there. And then from Cusco, we go up to Paucartambo. You see it on the map. And to get there, you're actually going over a mountainous region. You're going up through mountains and over. And then we're going to go up, we're going to end up in Atalaya. Danielle, can you point right there? Over there. Right there. So you're going from...
Which is on this river.
Which is the Madre de Dios, the Mother of God River, which is a huge river. So what you have here in Peru, and I had no idea about this, is that a large part of the Amazon rainforest, actually a third of it is located in Peru. It's just an amazing thing, and that's why we have this interest in experiencing the rainforest. And so we hooked up with this community that is doing ecological reforestation work in the Amazon rainforest. And it's called Choncachaca. And so we went online and we found out about them, and we thought, this sounds really good. This is something that we'd like to support. We'll get to experience the rainforest, but we'll experience with people who are trying to preserve it, rather than people who are just doing tourism in the rainforest, right?
And just to give you a little bit of background, like our first charity, actually, the one that we support the most, even more than the church, is
Well, that's not true.
well, Nature
It
Conservancy.
gets a lot of room from us.
So the Nature Conservancy of Canada. So we've always had an interest in that anyway.
Yeah.
So it kind of fed into an interest we already had, which might be the same for you if you're plan something that goes around your interests anyway.
And around your values, right?
Around your values, yeah.
This is the van that we drove. So what happened is, back in Cusco, we were met by the folks from, and you're going to see them shortly. And this was a van, and basically what happened is they just took the two of us. They took Danielle and me, and they were picking up some volunteers from Cusco to work at this eco-forestry reserve. And so the deal with us was they just picked us up and they just dragged us along and took us everywhere and did what they were doing, sort of deal, right? So that's kind of what it was.
So providing a little more income to them, they're taking the van anyway, might as well put 2 more people in it and get a little bit of money for the project.
Yeah.
So that's how it works.
So that's what it was. And so the travel was just fascinating. This is what we're traveling through the hills. This is a 9-hour drive. Picked up at 6 in the morning, and it's a 9-hour drive on roads like this. Okay, so you can see that, right? So that's what we're driving in a van, and here's up close. Those are the kind of roads that we're into, right? Yeah, well, there are little cutouts every now and again for people, and they're honking their horn whenever they go around the corner, sort of deal, right? And that happens. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So our driver, and sometimes in the water especially, our driver actually sort of circumnavigated around the left, but the road had just basically totally given way there, right? So that's on the road. We were praying many times. We were very grateful for our driver. And then check this out. This is the sort of thing that can happen on those roads. So this is a major truck, a flatbed truck that's transporting one of these big machines, and it just went off the road. It just went off the road, right?
And it's a major event, everybody watches.
That's more entertainment than TV, right?
Oh, it is, absolutely. I don't know if I have, yeah, so that's the sort of thing that can happen. But we're driving
tourist
generally through
destination.
countryside that looks like this.
David, somebody said how fast were they driving on the road?
Oh, they're 30, 40 kilometers an hour, I
He
guess,
was driving pretty
sometimes.
slowly. I mean, when he had a straight stretch, he just drive according to the conditions. Like I said, they were really good drivers. Like I hardly even felt the bumps when he went over. Like he just
Yeah, he was a superb driver.
really. He was hired to drive because he was a good driver.
But this is the countryside that we're driving through. Now,
This is one of my favorite spiritual places. that I
okay,
went
so
to.
this is along the drive we came to this spot. So Danielle, you want to say a word about this?
Yeah. So this is the lady, by the way, that started Choncachaca and owns the property. But anyway, this is a very ancient indigenous site, pre-Inca, and these are burials. This is
Those
where
are
people
burial
bury their
sites.
bodies. So they would put the body inside here. And yeah, so like kind of scrunched up like this. But, you know, again, always on high land because close to the gods, you know,
Yeah.
close to spirit. Actually, what's so interesting is that there is a hiking trail up there that goes pretty well the whole old Inca trail. So it actually passes by this. So if you're interested in that, that would be kind of a cool thing to do too.
The thing to be aware is that we think about the Inca culture, but there were Pachacutec, who was the main Inca emperor, lived around 1450. He was an incredible builder, but they built on civilizations that went way before them, right? And what they did was they were very good at utilizing prior civilizations.
Somebody said it this way, they were perfectionists. So
Yeah.
they took everything from everybody and perfected it.
But we'll get to that in a little bit. But this lady, Magdalena Ruiz, who started Chacachaca, is very interesting. She was an environmentalist originally, but she also developed a deep interest in Andean and Peruvian spirituality, and we're going to come to that shortly. So along the way, we come to this town, Paucartambo, that I showed you. It's sort of on a midpoint over to where we were going.
And it's a really neat place.
And it's a very, very strong indigenous community, very, very high indigenous kind of population. And we stayed there, we had lunch.
It's a meeting point between a number of other places, so it has a market day, and you know people come from all over the place to buy their things there.
Yeah, you can see. And these are some of the faces, right? I just love the faces of some of these wonderful indigenous women who are part of that culture, and they make this beautiful material as well. And they dress so colorfully still in the traditional clothing, which is but so many of the people there just dress that way. That's their everyday life, right? So that's how it is. This is their taxi again, one of these three-wheelers. Aren't they cool? I
This
think
is how
those
older
are.
people manage the city.
Yes,
Because it's up high and you have to get around, so you get practical.
So we're proceeding, we're going across those crazy roads, and now we're coming into Manu. So the Manu National Park biosphere in Peru is about 2,000 square kilometers of Amazonian rainforest, and it all washes into the Amazon basin. Okay, so that's where we're coming now. This is a little shelter on the way. It rained and it rained on that trip, but eventually we got past there and we're coming to Chacachaca. And this is our first view coming down the trail of Chacachaca.
The trail's washed out, we're like getting wet.
But there's this river, and you see the little place in the trees, and there's the river, and this is how they get across the river. And I think a bunch of you may have already seen on Facebook this. So this is how you have to get across the river, right? Do we have sound here, Darren?
One second,
We don't need the sound.
Oh, we want to hear the sound.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, thank you.
Gotta be kidding me.
Anyways, it's
Well, it had rained really, really heavily the day before, and actually one of their bridges had washed out. So they had another bridge or something else. They didn't have that either. That's why the water's so dirty. You know, if you come about a mile,
Okay, here we are.
it's crystal clear.
crank her up. Oops.
Oh, there you go.
There it is. So you got the idea, right? Where are we going? Well,
This is how the movie starts.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
This is where we're going.
So this is where we're going, right? This is where we're going, and this is the main building there. It's rustic. It's all open. I think the bugs were going to be terrible, and the bugs were Bugs are worse here, by far, let me tell you, but I guess the bugs they have are bad ones.
More common.
But, and that was where we slept. That was, they had a little cabin for us, right? And it's all screened in actually, but there's spaces between all those slats, so the screen is just a psychological. There's our beds, and you see the mosquito nets, and right in the bottom corner there's just a floor with a shower, a toilet, and a wash basin. I think there was a shower as well. So it was actually all the, you don't need anything more, right? Well, you know.
I don't see a tavern there.
Oh, there it is.
There's the tavern. There's that main building, and that's kind of what it looks like. And these are some of the people who came, some of them were visiting. The young couple down here had just been volunteering. Luis, you'll see another picture of it. He was actually our guide for all of this.
Guy at the end here.
This guy at the
He was
end.
our guide.
So here it is. So there's four amigos. Pink Floyd. We struck it off immediately. He's our guide.
This guy ended up being the shaman that David really resonated with.
We really connected with him, nice way.
And this guy is also sort of, he's kind of very committed to Chokoshenka, and he's raised a bunch of money. He's building a sort of a spirit place to do ceremonies.
Yeah.
So he's here building.
Yeah, he's working. We'll show you some of the building. Some of the other people. These two women in the middle beside Danielle are from Spain. Yeah, and they ended up doing the ayahuasca ceremony, which we'll tell you about shortly. And so I want to introduce you to Paula.
Oh, there we go. Oh, I go.
Say hi, Paula. Hello.
She was the resident monkey. But I prefer her in this area.
Yeah.
This is in her more natural environment.
They've had many monkeys at various times, but they usually just take off again.
Yeah.
But this Paula stayed there now for quite a while.
But you can see the buildings as well and the trails, and so she's pretty neat. So then part of our experience there was to have a walkabout through the jungle, right?
And she's carrying seedlings that they're going to use to plant.
Yeah.
They got seedlings along the way. They kind of hide between these leaves, and then they're going to use those to get trees so that they can plant, reforest. Because what they tell us basically is that it all looks green and lush, but there are no trees.
Yeah.
So, the trees have
A
been
lot
cut
of
down.
bamboo.
So a lot of
Incredible amounts
bamboo,
of
a lot of
bamboo.
other things, but the trees aren't there. So they're trying to, and you need the trees to have the canopies and all that, right? So that's what they're about.
So this guy is the forester. He's an indigenous person, knows the forest. He's showing us how to get water out of bamboo.
And it's medicinal, of course. Everything's medicinal in the forest.
Oh, yeah.
But this is dirty water.
Yeah.
So you need to know where to cut to get clean water.
Y se nota el agua,
Okay?
porque el agua limpia es diferente.
So forget that part, he says.
He said that.
And this is clean water. And they take a little piece of bamboo as a straw.
Oh, I gotta see this. You gotta take a video.
I'm always sick.
So there you go. So we're drinking, and there he's drinking. So you can. There are incredible resources within the jungle, right? This is many of the trees have sap that is has a health benefit. This tree has a white sap. There's another tree that has this white sap was good for skin conditions. There's another tree that has a red sap. It's a very bright red sap, which is, they believe, for blood conditions. So it's quite interesting. But they know, and we learned a lot about all of that. There's a couple of people goofing around. That's Luis and Danielle. And then, so we're in Chonkachaca. We're doing a walkabout in the rainforest there. And then they decide to take us on a trip to this place called Atalaya, which is on the river, the Madre de Dios River, which also feeds into the Amazon River eventually. And this is what we're driving in, the back of a vehicle like this. And this is backwoods Peru now, right? This is backcountry Peru. And this is...
Actually, this is Patria. And
This is
Patria was a drug community.
Yes, that's right there.
They have an airport close by, and they fly the drugs in and everything. Apparently it's clean now.
Yeah. Little restaurant on the way.
Which had delicious food.
Simple but delicious, right?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Automotive rent? See that? Yeah. Exactly.
And just one of the things we
Yeah,
did,
Sam.
I don't know if you'll get there, but because we were in a van, people needed rides. If there was room in our car, they were coming.
Yeah.
And if there was room in the back, people hopped in.
Yeah.
That's how it was. And that's how we were familiar with that from Guatemala anyway, but if you were doing that type of trip, don't get fazed by that either. Yeah.
This is our guide Luis, and that's his father. You can tell they're both characters. And then they take us to an indigenous community, and this is kind of what we came into. Now, this indigenous community, it's interesting. They were trying to promote tourism, so they had tourism dollars to build these kind of more elaborate places, but the whole thing just kind of...
Nothing was going on. Beautiful
Nothing was going
combination,
on.
but everything was broken or not going to happen. It just didn't happen.
Little schoolhouse. You see, you get points if you can see the parent. And so this is the wife of the shaman for this community, and she's holding this little baby, and there's another child holding a baby. The mother of those 2 kids have just died. And so she's looking after them at this point in time and is trying to figure out what to do with them, right?
So she took a ride with us into town to give them their needles.
Exactly. Little shop. There are these 2 kids who hitched a ride with us into town as well. They were just so sweet. And then on the way to the river where we're going, there's this is a rescue place for Amazonian animals, for jungle animals. So it's an animal shelter, right? That's what this place was. There off it goes. Scratching his butt.
To do that?
And here's another one. These 2 birds that were, aren't they beautiful?
We are here in the animal shelter.
Yeah. And that guy, I had
Yeah, I'm gonna grab that guy.
Yeah. So then we come to Atalaya, which is this community on this major river, and that's sort of what it looks like from the river. Just a small community once again. People live very simply there as well. But that's what you're looking at, right? That's the jungle, that's the river flowing, this Madre de Dios River flowing through. There's a little local entrepreneur, a very, really neat guy, Cesar, and he had a neat daughter, and he had built this place for the tourists who come through there.
These were bathrooms, and then we stayed upstairs.
We stayed upstairs.
So, proper bathrooms, showers, all that stuff.
There's the bathrooms down below. Corrugated roofs. Part of showing all this is, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun traveling in these places. It's not always being in Hiltons and places like that. This is actually fun. It's comfortable enough, right? But it's they make it comfortable, but it's still a lot of fun. Here we are taking a boat, one of the boat trips on the river. Yeah. the building up there. That's where we're going to. We're driving on the river, and in that building, there is a guy who is the ex-partner of the woman who founded Chongachaka. And his name is Dante, and he worked for the Forestry Service of Peru for many years. And that's where we're coming out. That's Dante.
Do they all have life jackets?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, they were life jackets.
There were life jackets.
They had all the safety stuff. But this guy, he basically owns this mountain, and his theory is you can't.
He doesn't own it, he's protecting it.
Protecting it, yeah. His theory is that if anybody, well, I'm going to do this that way.
Yeah.
If anybody comes near, they have to deal with me, right? And he's managed to preserve a lot of land that way. Look at how he built his kitchen, right up against a big rock.
That's-
And then that's the kitchen area. And this is a volunteer from Germany that's working with him.
So what they're doing is they're walking through the forest looking for loggers and illegal poachers. That's what they're doing. And he does that. He just lives. And I don't know if he has any volunteer funds coming in, but he's made that his life to protect the forest in that area. Here we're on the boat. A little bit of lunch on the boat. This was a second day we were on the river, and this day it rained. And that's another boat. And when it rains, it can rain. We were hoping to see some indigenous communities that border the river, but we never did end up actually seeing those communities. Now this is kind of cute too.
These are Peruvian birds.
Isn't that amazing? We think about the skills and the abilities that we have in our culture, and you recognize that people in other cultures have incredible skills and abilities that we know nothing about. Here's the family we stayed with in Adelaide, and this is their daughter, Stephanie. Do you want to? Yes, just
So
quickly.
she's brilliant. She's one of the most brilliant kids in National. Hours to get to school, hours to get back. Doesn't go to school most days. Just can't get there. There's no trucks, no nothing. Brilliant. She was, despite all that, top of her class in grade 6, and now she's going on to what they call their high school or junior high. They sent their son to Cusco for his education after a certain point to live with somebody. This woman also is brilliant. They're both brilliant, but she also really smart. And his daughter is for her. I just wanted to take her with me. It's just like, just give her some opportunities. She was, but
When you look around the world anywhere, every kid on this world has talent and intelligence and ability. What they don't have is opportunity, right, to develop it. And this girl made that so clear to us. So we're back to, after the river, we're back to Chongachaka, where they're building a chapel. This is their kind of spiritual ceremony place. And this is the guy who's going to preside over that. This is his Peruvian, a Chilean shaman. And he and I made a really, really good connection because he had read everything about quantum physics and mechanics and contemporary science and everything else. And we just hit it off, and he spoke relatively good English as well, right? And he sort of introduced to me what we discovered in this Amazonian community that we were in. It wasn't just about reforestation. Where they had gotten to is they were also very into Peruvian spirituality. And they conducted, how many of you have heard of ayahuasca? So ayahuasca is, I would have normally said originally it's a drug, but they call it a medicine, right? So lots of people from North America go to Peru nowadays to ingest ayahuasca, which is kind of a hallucinogenic sort of drug. And they also have another one called San Pedro. And there are little summaries there, and I won't read them, but the long
San Pedro is really the one that's like LSD kind of idea.
Yeah. But from the Peruvian mindset, certain kinds of drugs, and I guess from Western medical science too. So much of our Western medicine is derived from plant origins, right? So much of it is. They see certain kinds of plants that that contribute to certain kinds of inner subjective experiences as being a form of medicine, and when used appropriately and within the right context, right? And that's where.
So what he explained about ayahuasca, for example, is that it's part of a process, not part of a one-time use. It's kind of developing yourself and dealing with your issues and using the drug as a way to help you with it, right? The medicine as a way to help. And we were there for one of the San Pedro ceremonies, and it was an 8-hour thing.
And the two women
They were really sick.
Were really sick because part of what ayahuasca does is it causes you to vomit, and they see that as a purification kind of process. So I chose not to. Danielle chose not to as well. We're quite fine doing our own route, right?
But it certainly was. People go there for that reason.
Now I'm aware that we're already. How are you folks? Are you able to go a little further? Are you able to go? You know, this is like church on Sunday, right? I don't think
Daryl will let you know.
Yeah, nothing's changed in 362 days.
Here we are. We're down back to Cusco, and we're heading off to Machu Picchu, right? And there's the train. And there's in the waiting room for the train, you'll see this kind of stuff.
Far more touristy thing to do.
Yeah, far more touristy. And we get to Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu is actually, it's also a town. So you have the town Machu Picchu, and then up higher you have the actual ruins, right? The archaeological site. The town itself is incredibly interesting. And there's lots going on in the town, and good restaurants in the town. It's a pretty hip, it's sort of kind of like a Peru's Banff, okay? It's what it is. Really, because and it's sort of like Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu, they put thousands of people through there every single day. So it's just an incredibly busy place. And I thought because of that, I thought that Machu Picchu would be totally anticlimactic. I thought we stayed at a place called Gringo Bills. I thought Machu Picchu would be, I've seen all the pictures, I don't need to go. This is kind of our accommodation where this was actually a nicer place that we stayed. In the town they have all this stone artwork. And this is Pachamama. Okay, now Pachamama is very, very important in Peruvian spirituality, right? She is the author of the universe, she is the giver of life, and they have her a stone rendition in two forms. This is her welcoming, loving embrace of the world, and this one is of her pregnant, about to give birth. And just let me read this part. This work represents the Pachamama, Mother Earth in her maternal dimension. The artist shows a naked laid-back woman adhering to the tired rock's eternal relief. The detail resides in the characteristics of the sphere-shaped abdomen in gestation representing the world. So the abdomen represents the world. Meanwhile, the left hand caresses the abdomen, expressing a sign of hope for the creation of every new being. The infinite wisdom and discrete work is a constant struggle that seeks humanity's equilibrium. As one observes the present work's face, the latter denotes an expression of uncertainty for humanity, obsessed, confused, and distant from true natural happiness and harmony. There are elements of spirituality that emerge through the whole trip constantly, right? So in Peruvian society, their spirituality is very integrated in daily life. And here we come to Machu Picchu. You can climb up to Machu Picchu from the village, which is about 2 or 3 hours, Danielle, I think. Or you can take a bus up. We took the bus up because we were going to do other climbing. This is the first thing we saw were these walls. And then you start to see the ruins. And it was interesting because we saw it in fog and gray, and it had its own kind of mystique, just a lovely mystique. Look at that. Just incredible. And you see that shape in the back?
Yeah.
We didn't climb up to Machu Picchu, but we decided we were going to climb up that.
What's the altitude, Dave?
It's not that high.
You're going to
It's
see,
in the
but
jungle,
it's steep.
6,500 feet.
But it's steep, right? So here's you're starting to see, okay. And it starts to clear a little bit. You start to see these amazing ruins. This place is huge, okay. And then we decide we're going to climb that thing. That's Wadapichu. And you had to have a permit to climb
Yeah, we
it.
had to permit, so it was arranged ahead of time.
On the way to climb it, we saw one of these guys. I just had to snap his picture because he was so Then we managed to climb up. It was an incredibly steep climb. So it's 2,657 meters, I guess.
Meters, yeah.
But when we got up there, this is what we saw. And this is what we saw. Now, do you see that? We're up higher looking down on people who are looking down into all this fog and mist, right? So from up there, we couldn't see Machu Picchu at all, right? We couldn't see the ruins at all.
On a clear day, you would be able to,
But as we started coming down the other side,
then we start to see it.
it starts to clear. And then you see it, and you see it up in the mid corner there. And then as you keep coming down, it gets closer. And then you're right into it. And the terracing, the Incas were incredible engineers.
And I'm just going to give a piece of advice. If you do go to Machu Picchu, it's not a bad idea to buy the pass for the mountain because that allows you to stay all day. Otherwise, you can only stay half a day.
Half a day, yeah.
And so we could stay as long as we wanted, and it made a huge difference because towards the end of the day, we just hung out, and we were able to, a lot less people, a lot quieter, a lot more spiritual, if you want to call it that. You really had a sense of the place, right?
How old was it, David? How old is the?
Machu Picchu, well, it goes back to the 1400s.
It actually goes back much further.
goes back further
But
back.
the Incas built over top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this this Inca emperor, I
That's where the
guess,
bus goes.
created this,
Just so you know.
created it as a, no, that's not where the bus goes. That's the trail we took. We're walking up to the sun gate.
Oh, is that the
And
Sunday?
so we
Okay,
hiked
yeah,
up to
that's
that mountain at the far end, and then we did this other incredibly long hike. We were exhausted at the end of this. And that hike took us, I'm up there, and you can see Machu Picchu way back
So we got
down.
to see it from, we first from
Right.
this angle, then from that angle, right?
Right.
And in the different lights, so we really had a good experience.
And so that's from this other angle, you're looking down on that.
So there it doesn't look so massive, eh? We're in the midst of it.
But there, as you're coming back, this is what we're seeing. The site took our breath away. There was nothing anticlimactic about it all. It was absolutely, they say it's one of those bucket list places to go see. And it truly is. It feels sacred. It's the majesty of the site itself is just incredible. It
What kind of
was,
camera did you have, David?
what's
Just
that?
our iPhones.
This is just an iPhone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with your iPhone. So that's Machu Picchu, and after we went back to Cusco, and Cusco also has amazing ruins all the way around it. And so this is a major Inca ruin. Remember I showed you that church originally? Well, this is the major Inca ruin that they think connects with a tunnel to that church.
Well, not just think, it does.
It does, exactly. And so this is a major Inca ruin right on top of the city of Cusco. And that's what you're looking at here. Now, I just had to show you this little sequence.
Leaning away from that.
Here, I'm
No, he's not.
having a conversation with
Yes.
a llama, all right? I'm having a conversation with a llama, so I just have to show you this. So there's the first shot. Now, he says, you're getting in my face. And I've decided to get over there. Because they spit, you know? They spit, right? So, anyways, and this, it's a beautiful spot too. Now look up there.
Yeah.
You see the Christian, so it's an Inca holy spot, and then the Christians put the statue of Jesus there as well, overlooking the city, right? So it's just the whole thing is just absolutely stellar. And then in the whole vicinity around Cusco is this Ola Taitambo.
This is pretty incredible sight. I put
This-
that on your list if you're going.
This is called the second smaller version of Machu Picchu, and you're going to see pictures of that in just a second. But we're now back in Cusco, taking a few days to see what's called the Sacred Valley, which is the area around Cusco, and there's ruins and all sorts galore. And the countryside is just. This is our guide on one of these days, and he and Danielle.
This is just an example of not pre-planning, because we just decided when we were going to do it when we got there, and it's a lot cheaper. Like, it was
Exactly.
so cheap.
Yeah.
It was like $29 or something.
For a whole day tour.
and Tour and everything included,
Yeah.
right?
On the way, we're going to see some more of this. These are the Peruvians, and you see this everywhere, people trying to sell wares. This is the countryside. Terracing. We're going to show you some more about terracing shortly. And this is Ollantaytambo. And so this is kind of what they call the second Machu Picchu. Yeah. Now, this,
That's it, yeah.
yeah, you can start seeing. So this is looking down. You see the terracing.
Lots of climbing.
Lots and lots
These
of
people are
climbing.
pretty small.
Yeah. You start to see the walls, and that's up high. That's a lot of climbing that you're going up. You see that size, Daniel said, the size of the people. These are the cliff walls. And
A lot of the
that's-
cliff walls had burial sites in them as well.
Yeah. So it's hard to get the magnitude and the scale of that, right? But that's huge, right? It's just, yeah, it's just, these walls are just, yeah. Now this is more of the countryside.
The view of the valley is beautiful.
It is, it's just
stunning.
just exquisitely
Look at the sky.
beautiful. Yeah. So we go to this one place, I think this is in Pisac, Danielle, and this sweater that I'm buying that's around, you'll see, this was a cooperative where they produced clothing, and this woman did a little presentation for us. On this. She was actually very funny.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Naiden. Now I am going to explain to you about the weaving process. In this cooperative, we work adult alpaca, baby alpaca, and sheep. This is baby alpaca. The color is natural color. You can feel the difference.
It is so soft, just incredibly soft, the alpaca wool. And alpaca and llamas, there's a little bit of a difference between them. And you have to figure that out with their ears and what they look like. So, but look at how they're dressed and look at the materials, right? Yeah. And there are these alpacas.
Kind of king of the castle.
Yeah, that's right. And here are some of the
This
items.
is how
use.
they make, there's little bugs on this thing. And those little bugs get crushed, and that's what makes all the deep purples and,
Oh, good.
yeah,
Is that like coaching?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how they do that, and they can add more or less lime and more or less different other chemicals to change the color.
So on the next day, we went to Moray, and Moray is,
To me, that's a marble.
Wow.
This is a marble, because there's 3 of these, and they're actually used to experiment with crops. So each level is 1 degree warmer
Wow.
as you go to the bottom. And so at the bottom, it's jungle-like, and at the top, it's at the mountains. So they use that to make hybrids and that kind of thing. So I thought that was just amazing.
so the Incas were incredibly intelligent farmers and gardeners as well, right? Here you see more of that. Isn't that majestic? This is just a little town on the way. Here's some more of the countryside. Now this is the other amazing place, and I don't know how to, this is this place called the Salt Flats. And we're driving up on top, and we start to see this. What on earth is that, right? You're wondering, what is that? And then as you get closer, you start noticing it's all these little sections built into this mountainside where they harvest salt. So the water sits and flows, and they eventually, and then it dries, and then they harvest salt out of this place.
Basically, the water flows into those, and then they just manually shut it off and let everything evaporate. And there's 3 levels of salt. The top is the whatever, salt, or whatever.
Yeah, that's
and then below it are the table salt, and the bottom is your medicinal salts that you use for in your bath or whatever. Yeah.
So it's salinated coming out of the mountain, this water, and then it dries. So, okay, Eric, carry on. So off we go to Arequipa now. So this is the next place we went, which is in southern Peru.
There's go back one.
Yeah,
There's the volcanoes.
yeah. This Arequipa drew my imagination when Danielle and I were figuring out where we wanted to go, and I thought, this was the place I wanted to go to. And at first we were a little disappointed, but I had heard about these majestic volcanoes around the city. It's in southern Peru, it's much drier, it's more desert-like. And when we first got there, it seemed like just a big kind of industrial city, but as we came to appreciate these mountains. It actually has many beautiful areas, just like Cusco, very colonial. It's a major industrial center. Here's the markets again. This is where most people do their shopping. It's this white stone that they use to build everything there, which is quite interesting to a major cathedral. This is we stayed in a place, and this is from the rooftop of the place where we stayed. You can see that volcano. The streets, you see the buildings, they're all made out of this white silica type of stone.
Just go right to the monastery.
Yeah.
Because we're running out of time.
The intricate work. Catholic churches were filled everywhere.
And that's the other thing. That everywhere you went, they were filled, and every day of the week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a monastery.
This was a cool place. We spent quite a long time there.
Red rooms, blue rooms. This was a women's convent back in the Middle Ages.
It was used until very recently.
Looks like our kitchen here.
And then there was another monastery in this city as well. All the lovely courtyards and shaded atriums and...
Because the city was very noisy, but the convents were quiet. So it was a very nice place to just spend a few hours. They all had cafes.
This was a Franciscan monastery. The Franciscans were quite
look at the books.
instrumental.
Yeah, everywhere. They were
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, they were centers of learning back in those days. And then we went to the Colca Canyon from Arequipa. One of the reasons we went there too. The Colca Canyon is deeper than the Grand Canyon. These were our guides and the bus. This we all arranged once we got there, right? And again, cheaper than we would have done from here. This is the countryside we're going. This is in southern Peru now. More of those llamas. Danielle having a herb drink.
Look at this herb tea. I mean, it's just phenomenal. It's incredible.
And this is the countryside again, snow-capped mountains. The snow-capped mountains are experiencing a dissolving of the glaciers, and water is becoming an issue. We ended up in this little town, and this is way in southern Peru. This is way away, quite a distance from the main cities. We drove a long way to get here on back roads again. And you see people in that kind of traditional dress. This is the kind of music.
The show was kind of eclectic.
This was a more touristy thing down here. Yeah.
They recruited us into dancing and stuff like that.
Sort of their different stories being demonstrated, right? You still see people riding the roads goes on a burro. And this is the countryside heading into canyon lands.
I think this turned out to be one of the most, Gloria Henniger, she had died just before. This is the condor, and in the Inca tradition, it connects heaven and earth. It takes you to heaven, kind of thing. And I thought of Gloria there.
Exactly.
She was there. I thought she was free.
These condors have incredible wingspans, much larger than eagles, several meter wingspans.
And it flew right over our head.
And you can see I'm shooting down on it, right? And this is why a lot of people come here, because the condors ride the heat waves, the currents that come out of the valley, right?
And they start out as little dots, way down there, and then it takes about 20 minutes for them to ride the currents and come all the way up. And they don't always, right? Depends on what you got
Now
going.
watch this one in slow motion here. These are just magnificent creatures. Just absolutely beautiful. And they're absolutely huge.
One of those things you don't always, we may not forever have that ability.
How
to
big
see
did you
this
say,
close.
David? How big was it?
They are,
They're the biggest, I think, and widest praying.
they said they're the widest, they said it's like 3-4 meters across.
Wow.
They're huge.
humongous, like humongous.
They're just
When
massive.
they fly across from you, you feel it.
Yeah, they're absolutely huge.
Look at that. You can
Yeah.
see
You
it.
can see the
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
probably-
Just magnificent. That's a guy selling Danielle some jewelry. He was a character. So from Arequipa we got to Lima, and we're getting to the end of our trip then. So this is Lima. Lima is this, this was the place where we thought we were going to do things a little more comfortably. We spent a little more money on a hotel. And it's a big modern city in many respects. It's beautifully situated on these cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Lovely modern, just the whole waterfront across the top of these cliffs is just, it's beautifully done. You can see all of that.
When we came in, there was visuals of a city. Is it Lima that we were seeing?
Yeah, that was Lima. And so this is coming back to Lima now. Well, no, when you first came in, it was probably Cusco. I don't know.
Before you started talking.
No, I think that was just the Apple TV just,
That was just, yeah.
yeah, it was going on screen.
I'm sure that was Dubai.
That was just
So this,
Very comfortable neighborhoods.
lovely neighborhoods, lovely buildings, lovely architecture. A lot of the South American architecture in Buenos Aires is just lovely. Bike paths all across the top of the city as well. Nice parks. It was a lovely, relaxing place to hang for the
Finish the
last 2
trip
days.
before going back to work.
But this is the other side of the city too, right?
Yeah.
This is the other side of the city, okay? And we got to experience that as well. This is, you'll see the statue of Jesus up there as well in the top corner. And lots of houses in unfinished states of being, because people start with a little bit of money, they don't have a lot of credit, and then they build as they're able to get money.
That, and also they keep the rooftops that way anyway, and then they put corrugated carpet over the top to dry their laundry and everything. So even the wealthy folks leave their houses like that.
Yeah, there's those contraptions. Barranca wasn't the highest end, sort of ritziest neighborhood, but it was the funkiest neighborhood of the city, and it's well known. And we loved it there. And I just thought this was so cool, right?
Yeah.
That's like a piece of modern art, right? And the whole, Danielle, you're going to translate that for us?
Love is when the sky and the earth join. When the stars, brilliant stars,
Shine on
goes
you.
out, you know.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
there, you can see
Just
it's
little things like
a
that.
Che Guevara type, right? And the neighborhood stairs with artwork everywhere. Just loved it, right? this kind of thing. Lovely trees, boulevards. Check that out.
Did you get altitude sickness where you are here?
No,
No,
No?
it's sea level.
yeah, this is sea
Okay.
level.
You said indigenous people. Who are not indigenous? Like,
Pretty well all, it's like, I think 85% of people have some indigenous blood, right? Because there was a lot of intermarriage. This we could have in the middle of Halifax.
Yeah.
Lovers Park on the waterfront. And it's a pretty cool statue. Danielle and I had to get a shot with the two of us. And so the last day, we decide to, Danielle wants to go to the beach. And the beach wasn't super, but it was okay, right? We had nicer beaches. We wanted to get wet, and it was warm, and the beaches are nicer here, but the water's a lot warmer there. And so we're going to the beach, and throughout my stay, I had seen this kind of thing. And I said to Danielle, I want to do that. So she said, it's your last day. It's your final opportunity to do this, and you're going to do it.
Your last day.
Yeah, Mike here.
Exactly. I said, is the insurance policy paid up? She said, you go off and check out the guy up at the front, at the top there. So I went up. They hooked me all up. They got me into the gear. I was all set to go. And then the wind died. And so we couldn't go. But this guy then says to me, he says,
Well, it should also say that this guy is
Yeah, you can see
champion
it.
of Peru for long distance paragliding. So he's actually very experienced. He also worked in the States, so he had lots of credentials from here to Yin Yan. And his son actually and him are competing for the two top spots in the world. So they are way ahead of everyone else for distance paragliding.
so I got to trust him. I got to talk to him, and you have to chat with him. I got to trust him, got to talk to him, and got to know him a little bit. He said, no. He said, I know you'd like to do this your last day. He said, I've got something we can do for you. So he puts us in the back of his van, and he takes us, and we didn't know him super well at this point, and he takes us to this compound, and I said, Danielle, either this guy's legit, or he's a terrorist, taking us to some compound, and we're going to be
But I'm
held
serious,
for
like we're
ransom.
going out to this middle of nowhere, there's this dirt, whatever, and I'm thinking, is this a scam or what? Like, we are. And then there's this storm door, and they're going to take you into
Steel
this
Zeta,
complex,
so-
and I'm like, do we really want to go in there?
So we get in there, and lo and behold, there's this contraption. Right, there's this contraption. I said,
It's
oh!
held together with like duct tape.
Danielle said, you gotta be nuts going up in that thing. So, anyways, so that's what it's like up in that thing, right? That's what it's like up in that thing.
That was fun.
I figured,
That was more than $29.
I kept being afraid that I'd drop my iPhone. The lesson here is sometimes you just got to go for it. And our last night, the final romantic stroll along the waterfront of Lima, and incredible sunsets.
oh,
Nice.
Wow.
That's the Pacific, and then there's night over the city. And then the next day we headed
Well,
back.
actually, that night we flew out
That
very
night we
late.
flew out.
Is that the moon?
No, that's,
No, not that.
at the very end, that light you see is, I'm not not sure if that's the statue of Jesus that's lit up at the very end.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think it is. That's what that is.
How do you get from like the promenade down to the beach?
There.
A long way. Well, actually, if you go through Barranco down below, it's just not as bad, but there's a lot of climbing.
Lots of stairways.
Lots of stairs.
Lots of stairs. You can do it. You can do it.
It is, you just take your time, but there are taxis for next to nothing too. Yeah. We did take a taxi, I think, the second time.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. So
There we go.
that's cool.
Very cool.
Some of the,
Paul?
do any of the people, like your guides in the interior, ever get to the coast or get into Lima? I mean,
Yes.
some of them travel a little
Oh,
bit.
in terms of, yeah, but on the rickety bus that breaks down all the time, yeah.
But you know, there's a little bit of Cusco versus Lima sort of thing.
Definitely.
And people, and like the family with the girl that Danielle talked about was the woman, they've never been to Lima. They have never been to the coast, right? Have never been out at all. So there are lots of people in that who they don't have the money. They don't have the money to travel like we have the money to travel.
I have never been to Truro since last Friday.
Right. Well, yeah.
Fortunately, I can
That's true. That's true, yeah.
The joy of
Well, let me just say
Yeah.
one other thing. The women work hard. The women work hard in this country. They do a lot of the work. I mean, it's just interesting. Every woman you meet is doing a zillion things and working both working in the workplace, working at home, working on the street. They're always working. You know, it's really interesting.
life is harder,
Yeah.
physically harder for
People are working,
regular people, right?
you know, so,
Does that add to their life or shorten their life? Do they have more?
I don't know, just know they work hard. They
Yeah.
work hard all the time.
Sadly.
So where you were to the volunteer place, they're trying to replant the jungle there, the trees, I guess, that were missing. What had happened to the trees that were there? Was
Logging.
it just clear cut?
Logging.
Logging.
And
There are a lot.
bamboo?
We went out to see an old growth, a ancient tree, because that's all there were. There was one.
You think of the Amazon, and you think there's old growth forest everywhere. Anywhere there's a river, a couple of kilometers back from the river, there is
Nothing.
no forest whatsoever. It's all been totally logged, right? It's all been totally
And that was
logged.
for agriculture?
No,
A lot
just
of
for logs.
Just for lots of
Yeah, for logging and transportation and that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So David, you began by suggesting that perhaps some of your previous travel was in a more comfortable way. And you were anticipating and looking forward to the notion that perhaps this was more significant to you, of real consequence. Having come back, even with that little aircraft shot at the end, would you continue to go in this direction for your tourism?
Oh, no, we've always traveled this way.
Always?
Yeah, we've always,
Well, no.
for the
Between
most
two
part.
of you now, you were suggesting that.
Yeah, well,
No, we
for the
do,
most
we
part.
do this fairly often, like if we
Yeah.
go places, we often stay at hostels, if we go
It's done well.
if we do a
Is this where they
camping
walk
trip,
up?
like like when we went to the Yukon,
Not 'cause you're
we
cold.
travel half camping, half this type of accommodation. It's what we do, that's why we can stay as long as we stay.
Did you check your bags or did you just carry on?
Carry on.
Hey, how long were we gone for total?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Carry on bag. That's how they travel.
Wow.
Yeah, one night, 2 bags.
It's,
And we had way too much.
That's for sure.
That's for sure.
4 years together,
And product.
we traveled more like this. We've done a little bit of higher end traveling, but not a lot.
Usually when we
right?
travel higher end, it's because we're with
With
family.
other people and that
You
sort
know,
of
we're
thing.
with
right?
family or somebody else that's.
It's more rewarding. You get to know real people in their real lives, right? You get to know about their struggles and joys. As Danielle said, you develop real conversations about real things with people. That's so much of the trip, although it's about places, hopefully you've caught a bit of a sense, it's hugely about people. It's hugely about people. Lima in the end was a little bit more just like a chill and relax and have a little bit more, but most of the trip up to Lima was about people. We had wonderful relationships, and even in Lima, getting to know this Peruvian hang glider guy. We had a whole long afternoon of fascinating conversation with him too about his life.
I guess what I'd say is none of it really, most of it was not predictable. I mean, most of it we didn't know it was going to turn out the way it was.
You can't plan
And
those
we
things.
would not
so,
have
yeah.
not known that we were going to meet those particular people and that they would mean something to us and us to them. And even like us fellow travelers are emailing us and chatting about, asking what they want us to come to Australia, or they want us to come with them to Colombia, or that kind of thing.
I was just thinking, well, my experience was I've taught around the world quite a few places, and every place I went to, all the kids want to be westernized.
Yeah.
They don't want their culture.
That's true.
That they're all into Beyonce, they're all into TV.
It's not for you, you can't
right?
take it home.
And when various places I would be at, they would have to put on their culture.
Yeah.
It was,
We had conversations about that.
it was almost.
So one of the things they said, is there's a real concern that they'll lose the local language, the Quechua, because when they go to school, they have to pick a second language, and they're picking English. They're not picking Quechua. So they are very concerned about losing that. The elders are quite concerned, So these are, because it has to do with money. If you want to have a little bit of money, you need to be able to speak English to the tourists. And, bring it. They're entrepreneurial, right? So they're out to everything they can do to run a good business. Yeah.
Can I just one of the tragedies that I've never thought about this before. It's an interesting thing I read about, pertinent to what you're saying there, is that we think about the loss of environmental diversity, but what has happened with the loss of environmental diversity around the world, and ecological diversity, has also been the incredible loss of cultural diversity. We've lost languages, we've lost cultures, we've lost whole ways of life, right? I never put those two together before, but that was kind of and people were bemoaning that we spoke with as well. Yeah, Bob.
We just, in the Matthews and so on, where you travel with the spirituality and see a lot of individuals were, feeling that type of, also movement. Is that the case across the country? Because you were mentioning also Catholic Church is quite a significant part of a lot of these people's.
Yeah, and the churches are quite indigenized as well. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a real,
So it's bringing in.
Yeah, even the paintings, there's indigenous content in all the paintings they stuck in there, right? The artist made sure, there was lots of indigenous content in the paintings. So it's quite interesting, and the practices, they've been able to, bring some of their own practices into the Catholic Church. So it's quite interesting. So that was kind of neat to see. But it was also heartening to see that it was part of the DNA, that there was something beyond, it was just every conversation pretty much. Someone had something to say on that.
You mentioned spirituality a couple times. How would it fit to BUC?
Shaman was talking about quantum mechanics with me. It's about interdependence.
Fit pretty good, I think.
Interdependence and interconnectivity. That Magdalena Ruiz, who started Shaka Shaka, I didn't want to leave before I shared this quote with you. She said, where was it? Beautiful, beautiful quote. Let me just...
I think I remember it.
No, hang on. Let me just get it right. I just had it here a second ago. It's basically, as we recover the forest, we recover our own souls. As we recover the forest, we recover our own souls. In caring for the earth, we recognize our interdependency, our interconnectedness with all of life, and ultimately with the divine. That the divine is this source of connectivity and interconnectivity between all of us and everything, and that's what they're discovering in that process. Right?
What else? Well, folks.
Daryl said to me beforehand, he said, from the millions of slides, did you get it down to an hour? And I said, oh!
He hardly
I
went
actually
over.
sent him a text this afternoon and said, I hope you're working on letting that down. Oh, well, how long exactly do I have? So,
Yes.
thank you. So, we had the 4 presenters. We were wowed by all of them, but you know you're last for a special reason, because you're very special to us. And the Harts will be coming back to Bedford United Church in the fall. And all of us, in our obligation to welcoming back David Hart and Danielle Hart, not Reverend Hart. So they'll be part of our family, they'll be with us when the time is right for them, and we can hardly wait for them to do that.
What committees are they
I
doing?
was just gonna.
Not yet. I'm in charge of nominations, so let's get in the door first.
Has Andy Baker talked to you yet? Do you know Ann?
No, but I'm chatting with Matt, and I'm chatting with Katie, and when they asked me about committees, I went,
Just when you think you're out, they draw me back in again. So our job as leaders is to make sure that people are welcoming them, but also not expecting of them. So thank you folks so much. There's a little bit of wine back there, there's lots of snacks. Welcome to chit chat for a while, but thanks again for spending the time.
Thank you, Daryl.
oh, you know. It's a constitutional inadequacy. That was the only guy that I saw, but that was amazing. That was amazing those ones, that was a place it's lovely. Oh no, it's just awesome. Yeah, just